Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I would like to talk about my ITC secondary ideas, or how I would rebalance the ITC Champions missions. The guys at Frontline Gaming, who are the guys that run the ITC and create the Champions missions, they are looking for ideas on how to change the secondary scoring options and make them better. They said on stream that they feel that the game has evolved enough with new armies and new units that it's time for a change to help rebalance the missions to make them more enjoyable for everyone. So in this video, I will talk about my proposed changes for the ITC Champions missions that I think would make the game a little bit more balanced. But before we get into the main topic, this video was sponsored by themagnetbaron.com. They sell magnets of all sizes for models, they have magnetized flight stands, magnets for magnetized army trays, and even offer pre-built and magnetized models, all for a great price. So if you need anything magnet related for the hobby, then check out themagnetbaron.com. The link is in the description. So for those of you who are new to the ITC, let me explain how the ITC Champions missions work. First, let's talk about the scoring and briefly go over the other things that make the ITC Champions missions unique. So in the ITC Champions missions, there is primary scoring and secondary scoring. Primary scoring is very simple. You get 1 point at the end of your turn if you killed at least one enemy unit, and you get 1 point at the end of your turn for being on at least one objective. At the end of the battle round, which is at the end of both players' turns, whoever killed more units gets an extra point, and whoever is on more objectives gets an extra point. Again, it's pretty simple. It basically comes down to kill more stuff and be on more objectives to get more points. Secondary scoring is based off of the missions that you pick at the beginning of the game, after seeing the mission you will be playing and after seeing your opponent's army, spells, and traits. You pick 3 secondary missions for your games, and these secondaries can only be scored for a maximum of 4 points each, meaning you can only get 12 points altogether for your secondaries. These secondaries, as of right now, are things like Line Breaker. For every 2 units you have within 12 inches of your opponent's rearmost table edge, gain 1 point. Or things like Big Game Hunter. Gain 1 point for every enemy model you kill with 10 or more wounds. There are a few of them, so I'm not going to mention them all, but they're all basically variations of the missions from the tactical objective cards, with some new additions with stuff like Recon, which is have a different unit in all 4 quadrants of the board. So you pick 3 of these things to help boost your score alongside your primary scoring in these missions. Primary scoring is the most important part and gives away the most points, while secondary scoring is basically just tiebreakers for extremely close games, and I'll discuss that concept more in another video. The way the game ends in ITC is that the game ends on turn 6 no matter what. There is no rolling to see if the game continues, you just play to turn 6 and the game ends, and that's it. The placement of objectives in ITC missions is predetermined by the mission you are playing. Depending on the mission, it will give measurements for where each objective should be on the table, which ensures that no matter which deployment both players get, both players will have easy access to 1 or 2 objectives and will have to fight over the other objectives that the opponent has easy access to. It's simple and easy, yet very effective in my opinion, when it comes to balancing the game out to be a competitive experience overall, which I would like to talk more about, but I'll leave that for another video as well. So now you understand how the ITC Champions missions are played, and that Frontline Gaming wants help rebalancing and changing the secondaries to make them better. So let's talk about the current secondaries. So here's a list of the secondaries. So as you can notice, there are quite a few secondaries in there that are actually about killing specific units, like characters or units with 10 or more wounds, and personally, I don't really like these secondaries, and here's why. I don't like them because they really dictate on how you should build your list, and it sometimes stops you from bringing the best list you possibly can because you're afraid of bringing too many units that give away a specific secondary. You can also quote-unquote cheat the system by taking only units with 9 models instead of 10 so they don't give up the Reaper. You could do some shenanigans like combat squatting units after your opponent picked the Reaper, or combining your squads after your opponent picked the Reaper. That way you screw with their scoring and they won't get as many points as they initially thought. These secondaries aren't counterable outside of tailoring your list or screwing your opponent over with combat squads or combining squads, and that is something I've never liked. I like it when you can have ways to stop your opponent from scoring those secondaries outside of tailoring your list. If you look at other objectives like behind enemy lines or recon, you can use board control in the game to stop your opponent from scoring those, which actually takes tactics and skill, which I very much like. I like objectives that can be countered through gameplay and not necessarily through list tailoring. So with that said, here are my proposed changes for the ITC secondaries. These are the secondaries that I would implement. As you can see, I've taken out all of the secondaries that have to do with killing something except for Old School, which I actually think should be a mandatory secondary. Maybe even create its own category and don't consider it a secondary. Add it to the primary scoring, I guess. The different submissions within Old School could be argued are a primary part of the game, which is First Blood, Linebreaker, and Slay the Warlord. Even in Games Workshop missions, Linebreaker, Slay the Warlord, and First Blood are always a thing in almost every mission, so I feel the same should be for ITC. It kind of doesn't feel like Warhammer 40k without those things being included in every game, so personally I'd like for Old School to be mandatory. Even in the ETC, they still use those as well, except I think they might have changed First Blood to First Strike. Don't quote me on that, I don't play ETC that much. With that change, it would mean you would get to pick 2 more secondaries, and if you notice the secondaries I went with, they're all position-based secondaries, which will bring more tactical movement into the game. All of these secondaries as well can be countered with board control instead of list tailoring, which I think is great. It causes player interaction instead of just kill this unit to get points, and emphasizes tactically outpositioning your opponents over just having more firepower than your opponent, or tailoring your list better than your opponent. The list of secondaries to choose from isn't that long since Old School is automatically picked, but that just means picking secondaries at the beginning of the game is that much easier and quicker, especially because you would probably build a list that is good at scoring at least 2 of these secondaries every game, so you would pick those every game and then would build for those secondaries, which is an idea that I got from my list that I made for the recent GT I attended. I built my list to not care about the enemy's list at all or for the kill stuff secondaries, and instead I built my list to always go for recon and behind enemy lines and outposition my opponents. My opponents usually never had a game plan like mine and really just planned on scoring the secondaries that were based off of the enemy army, like the Reaper and Big Game Hunter. But then they would play against me, who not only built my list to easily score positional secondaries that didn't depend on the enemy army, while also having a tailored list to not give up any of the kill stuff secondaries. So basically, the player playing against me was set up to fail from the beginning because they never had a proper game plan to go into the game. I was able to score my secondaries no matter what their army was, while their scoring usually depended on my army or the army they were facing, which didn't seem fair. So why not add more options to the game so that every army can pick secondaries that don't depend on enemy lists and instead depend on their playstyle? They can build a gun line that can max out hold the line every game, or a Death Star that can control the center of the board every game, or a melee army that gets into the enemy's lines every game. Literally every type of army has at least one secondary they can pick and build their list off of that doesn't depend on the enemy list. And sometimes they can pick 2 secondaries depending on how they build their list. So I could see the ITC going forward, since it's already a format that is heavily list tailored for the missions, why not make it so that everyone can tailor their list for the missions? It doesn't matter which army they're playing, they have a couple secondaries that they can pick and max out every game. So like I said earlier, I absolutely hate secondaries that are based off of your opponent's list, and I think that adding these positional secondaries would help the game a lot, since people can have an actual game plan going into the game instead of just hoping their opponent didn't tailor their list. It would probably surprise you, but at my local club, the majority of people absolutely hate ITC because of the secondaries and how if you bring a certain list, you're basically penalized because you give up so many secondaries. And the thing is a lot of armies in the game have to give up these secondaries because they don't have any other optimal builds. For example, Necrons. They're always going to be playing foot Necrons, where they're a foot slogging up the board, which means they're almost always going to give up the Reaper. And then you have stuff like Knights, which are going to give up Titan Slayer and going to give up Big Game Hunter every game no matter what. Well, as long as the opponent can kill the Knights. But what I'm trying to get at is there's a lot of armies in the game that can't tailor their list around the current ITC secondaries, and that actually hurts them a lot. And that's why I think we keep seeing like Eldar and Dark Eldar in the top so much, is because they can easily tailor to the ITC missions right now, where they don't give up any secondaries, but they can max out recon and behind enemy lines every game. It's just not fair for every army in the game with the way the current secondaries are. And I think that if those secondaries that are based off your opponent's list were removed, there would be a lot less complaints about the balance of ITC missions, and there would be a lot less quote-unquote gaming of the system like there is now with all of the list tailoring. If everyone can build a list that is guaranteed to get some good secondaries that are good for them but can still be countered, then I think that adds a lot of tactics to the game and it would benefit the game overall. But yeah, so let's summarize this video real quick. I think that the ITC should make old school mandatory, because that's just, it doesn't feel like Warhammer without First Blood, Slay the Warlord, and Linebreaker. And then after that, you should be able to pick 2 more secondaries, but those secondaries should only be positional based secondaries that any army can pick. Like I said, I'll show them right now again. With these secondaries, a gunline army can pick a couple secondaries and be able to do well. A mobile army, like a melee army, will be able to pick a couple secondaries and be able to do well. A Death Star army will be able to pick a couple of these positional secondaries and be able to do well. None of these secondaries rely on your opponent's list. So that means we should remove all of the secondaries that have to do with kill a unit with 10 wounds or kill a unit with 10 or more models, because all people are doing is tailoring their list to not give away those secondaries and make some lists have a harder time in the tournament scene. Because again, stuff like Necrons, they need to have 10-man squads in order to be competitive. So they're always going to get the Reaper picked against them, which makes them lower than where they should be in the rankings, just because the way the scoring works absolutely hurts that army. Whereas there's armies like Dark Eldar and Eldar, which can avoid all of the secondaries, but can still get recon and behind enemy lines every game, which I don't think is fair. So I think it would be more fair to take out all of the kill stuff secondaries and replace them with positional secondaries that every army can possibly get. So that way, again, gunline armies will do well, Death Star armies will do well, mobile armies will do well, melee armies will do well. Every army has secondaries they can pick that do not rely on the opponent's list, which I think is the biggest factor in the balancing issues we've had with the ITC missions. So that's going to be it for this video. If you like these ideas, then let me know down in the comments. And if you don't like these ideas, then you can also let me know down in the comments. I like to think of these videos as a discussion for our community, so discuss away and let me know what you think. Also, if you enjoyed the video or liked what I had to say, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe for more Warhammer 40k content. And if you want to help support the channel even further, or you wish to take part in my list building service, you can check me out on Patreon. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy wargaming!